And this verse says, now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel my great delusion. Due to my feeling of false ego, I have been engaged by your Maya and have identified myself with the body and consequent bodily relations. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. The false ego of identifying one's body as oneself and of claiming things possessed in relationship with this body is called Maya. In Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, the Lord says, I am sitting in everyone's heart, and from me come everyone's remembrance and forgetfulness. David Huti has stated that false identification of the body with the self and attachment for possession in relation to the body are also under the direction of the Lord. Does this mean that the Lord discriminates by engaging one in his devotional service and another in sense gratification? If that were true, it would be an incongruity on the part of the Supreme Lord, but that is not the actual fact. As soon as the living entity forgets his real constitutional position of eternal servitorship to the Lord and wants to instead enjoy himself by sense gratification, he is captured by Maya. This capture by Maya is the consciousness of false identification with the body and attachment for the possessions of the body. These are the activities of Maya, and since Maya is also an agent of the Lord, it is indirectly the action of the Lord. The Lord is merciful. If anyone wants to forget him and enjoy this material world, he gives him full facility, not directly, but through the agency of his material potency. Therefore, since the material potency is the Lord's energy, indirectly, it is the Lord who gives the facility to forget him. Devahuti therefore said, my engagement in sense gratification was also due to you. Now kindly get me free from this entanglement. By the grace of the Lord, one is allowed to enjoy the material world, but when one is disgusted with material enjoyment and is frustrated, and when one sincerely surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Lord, then the Lord is so kind that he frees one from entanglement. Krishna says, therefore, there in the Bhagavad Gita, first of all, surrender. Then I will take charge of you and free you from all reactions of sinful activities. Sinful activities are those activities performed in forgetfulness of our relationship with the Lord. In this material world, activities for material enjoyment, which are considered to be pious, are also sinful. For example, one sometimes gives something in charity to a needy person with a view to getting back the money 4 times increased. Giving with the purpose of gaining something is called charity in the mode of passion. Everything done here is done in the modes of material nature, and therefore all activities but except or but service to the Lord are sinful. Because of sinful activities, we become attracted by the illusion of material attachment, and we begin and we think, I am this body. I think of the body as myself and of bodily possessions as mine. Devahuti requested Lord Kapila to free her from that entanglement of false identification and false possession. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Well, this verse is talking about the false ego and how one gets trapped by identifying with the body and gradually developing the false ego. And once that happens, it's very difficult to free oneself from that position of being what you would call overwhelmed by the false ego. However, it is possible to overcome that, and that's the whole purpose of Krishna consciousness. That's why Prabhupada says in a Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, the Lord says, I am sitting in everyone's heart, and from me come everyone's remembrance and forgetfulness. Okay, so Krishna can give you remembrance or forgetfulness. Uh, Actually, that forgetfulness is in two ways. When you become Krishna conscious, you can forget about uh, sense gratification and nonsense. And when you're not in Krishna consciousness, you can forget about Krishna. So uh, the forgetfulness of sense gratification means you're making spiritual advancement. But simply forgetting about sense gratification is not enough. You have to proactively be engaged in devotional service also. Then you become Krishna conscious. Simply forgetting about sense gratification is a very like a first step toward being liberated, but it's not enough. You have to be factually engaged in devotional service. And now, not only forget about sense gratification, but you are always engaged in Krishna's service. Therefore, this verse is talking about the false ego. And that's why it says, now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel my great delusion. Due to my feeling of false ego, I have been engaged by your Maya and have identified myself with the body and consequent bodily relations. So this is the, let's say, the prayer of a devotee, and this is a very good prayer. Uh, the devotee recognizes that he is under the concept of the false ego, and being engaged by Maya, uh, one identifies with the material body and the relationships with other material bodies, like family members and relatives, and so forth. Uh, so this makes a hard knot of Maya in the heart of a devotee. I mean, in the heart of a person. Now, to undo that hard knot is not easy. And that was Arjuna's problem also. He had that hard knot of uh, connection with his so-called family and extended family. Therefore, that hard knot was so hard that Arjuna threw down his bow and arrow and said, I will not fight to Krishna. So now the drama of the of the Bhagavad Gita is how Krishna is going to convince Arjuna to pick up his bow and arrow and fight and kill his own relatives. Uh, so you see, that's not an easy thing to do. Uh, that's why the example of Arjuna is very important, because one should even go to the level of killing one's own, uh, let's say, relatives, close relatives and distant relatives. Now, that doesn't mean you murder them. It means that you kill your attachment to false attachment to the bodies of relatives, and could be friends also, and so forth. We we don't kill the body of a person. We kill our attachment to people, and uh, and replace that with attachment to Krishna. So this false attachment is what is keeping people like slaves in the under the influence of Maya. Now, how does Maya become so powerful? It's actually the question we have to ask is, how do people become so ignorant? Well, that's pretty easy to understand. They avoid Krishna consciousness, and then they become caught in the clutches of Maya, and it's very difficult to get out of that, sad situation. It's only possible by coming in contact with a bona fide spiritual master and devotees. Without the help of a bona fide spiritual master and devotees, it's virtually impossible to break the hard knot of material, uh, family, and uh, family attachment, and also the attachment for sense gratification. So, in this verse today, talking about the false ego, the verse itself is a prayer to Krishna, and it's saying, "Now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel my great delusion. Due to my feeling of false ego, I have been engaged by your Maya and have identified myself with the body and consequent bodily relations." This is what you would call uh, a, a prayer to Krishna. Devahuti is praying. Uh, she's a woman, she's a mother, and but at a certain point, she realizes that her real family is Achyuta Gotra, the family of Krishna, which is an eternal family. It's not her mundane family. The mundane family comes and goes. It's not going to be eternal. But the spiritual family of Krishna, which is called Achyuta Gotra, that's eternal. So that's why Devahuti is saying that now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel my great delusion. Due to my feeling of false ego, I have engaged in your Maya and have identified myself with the body and consequent bodily relations. This says if a person comes to this realization, and this is basically a prayer uh, that David Huti has, uh, this is a what you would call the beginning of the end of nonsense and self identification, false identification, and taking up the path of eternal liberation. It's very important that one can overcome the false ego of identifying with the body as oneself and of claiming things possessed in relationship with this body. This is called Maya. In other words, even in a young age, like kids, they develop this false ego. I remember in my hazy early days, when I first went to kindergarten, I came the first day to kindergarten with a shovel and a pail, and and that was the thing that I would play with. And that first day in kindergarten, I remember some kid took my shovel and my pail, and I got really upset, and I was like crying. I wanted to get back my pail and my shovel. I was attached. So uh, even from a very early time in life, a kid might only be 1 or 2 or 3 years old. They think that certain things belong to them, and they develop this possessiveness and attachment. And so Maya begins even from the earliest time in the life of a child. Uh, so to break that great illusion, that's why Devahuti is praying here. She says, "Now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel my great delusion." Okay, so there is illusion and there's delusion. So when a person uh, identifies with the body, it is illusion. When they act uh, throughout their life, maintaining that bodily attachment, now they're in a state of delusion. When they act on the principle of the false ego, then they're in a state of delusion. Illusion means you make a mistake. You identify with the body. But now, when you actually believe that you're the body and you act on it, now you're in a state of delusion. You're acting like a crazy person. And so you can look up, see what the difference is between illusion and delusion. Illusion and delusion. Illusion means you make a mistake. Delusion means you've gone crazy because you actually believe that mistake is the truth and you're acting in a state of delusion. When you actually act in a state of believing the illusion to be true, now it's delusional. If you make a mistake, well, that's a mistake. If you act and believing that the mistake is true, now you're in a state of delusion.
Illusion is a misperception or misrepresentation of reality.
Right. So it's a mistake.
Then delusion is actually a false belief.
Right.
That is held despite clear evidence to the contrary.
Exactly. So there's illusion and there's delusion. The delusion is really serious because you're believing something that was never true.
Mm.
Like, and this happens very early in life. One believe, just like I had my shovel and my pail when I went to kindergarten. I took my shovel and pail with me, and I was in a state of delusion. I thought that these things belonged to me. And when one kid took it away from me, I got really upset and I was crying and I wanted it back. And I had a little tug of war with that kid that took my pail and my shovel away.
Illusions are usually corrected once the reality is understood, whereas delusions often persist despite evidence to the contrary.
Yeah, that means some people are deluded their whole life. Why? Because they identify with the body. So they go through the whole life deluded. I remember once uh, I yeah, I was invited. I was invited by this Armenian family uh, to their house, and then I started talking about Krishna consciousness, and they were not interested at all, right? And uh, and then the lady of the house said, uh, "I don't believe in this in Krishna. I don't believe in this Krishna consciousness. Uh, I'm an Armenian for life, you know." Like, and then I realized I was making a mistake trying to preach to these people. Right? Uh, so that false ego and falsely identifying with the body rather than identifying oneself as the eternal servant of Krishna, that means that one is under the influence of Maya. And therefore, uh, in order to uh, function like that, one needs Krishna's help. So Krishna gives forgetfulness to the devotee, or to the not the devotee, but to a person, so that they can function as a sense gratifier. But when one comes in contact with a genuine devotee, now they pray like this in this prayer by Devahuti. Now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel my great delusion. Well, look, she's a mother, and she realizes that although her husband was a pure devotee, she didn't really uh, understand that at first. And then when the husband left, and she had to raise her son, Kapila Muni, she realized by associating with her son, who's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that she was subject to a great delusion. So, illusion means you make a mistake, and delusion is when you believe the mistake is true and act on it. Now you're in a state of delusion. And an illusion is a mistake that you make. You take a rope to be a snake. Right? And then when you act on it by being afraid that that rope is a snake, and you say, snake, 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 and you start running away or something. Now you're in a state of delusion. The illusion was the mistake. In the darkness or in the dim light, you mistake a rope to be a snake. You know, but now you when you actually act on it, your fear, you start running away and you start screaming, snake, snake, snake. That means you're in a state of delusion. Delusion means you believe something that was never true to be true. Just like the number one delusion is to believe I am this body. At no time have we ever been this body. It's a false concept, completely false concept. But we believe that it is true. So that is the number one delusion that most people have. They believe something that was never true to be true.
Yeah. This will be illusion, right? We are not this body.
Illusion is a mistake.
We are not this body is a delusion.
Acting in that.
Acting on it. Acting on it. Acting like that is illusion.
But considering I am this body, this is illusion. And acting on the body platform
is delusion. Yeah. Yeah, you make a mistake, you think I'm this body. But then you become convinced that I am this body and you act like that. That's a state of delusion.
Even after knowing also, if we act, that is definitely the
That is a state, Maharaj, right now. Like if I talk about myself, I know that I have the information, but it's not like fully acting on that platform. But most of the actions are still they are on the basis of body.
This is my body. This is my
And I am
children.
also this
This
body.
is my wife. This is my house. This is my car. Yeah. So it doesn't mean that we get rid of those things. See, the Maya body would say, okay, we give up all those things. Right? A devotee learns how to use all those things in Krishna's service. You see, that's the difference between the Maya body and the devotee. The Maya body believes you give up everything and you just silently meditate. So when you go to Mayavadi, let's say programs, they're all meditating. They're not acting; they're just in silent meditation. And uh, and of course, you can't maintain silent meditation for a long time, right? So they meditate and they think they're making some type of spiritual advancement. Then they go back to working and everything. So it's basically a waste of time and energy. But the devotee, he, when he becomes Krishna conscious, now he learns how to use everything in Krishna's service. The Mayavadi wants to give up everything, uh, bad habits and good habits. He's not interested in Krishna at all. He's just interested in his own emancipation, his own liberation, and therefore he tries to, he does neti neti. He says, well, the truth is not this and it's not that. And he continues doing this, not this, not that, not this, not that. And he eventually also eliminates Krishna and devotional service. Uh, and therefore, it's like a, uh, a cocoon. A cocoon is part of the life cycle of a butterfly. At one point, the butterfly uh, is entrapped by its own cocoon. Look that up. It's some kind of um, um, some kind uh, of a prison that in the state of development of the butterfly, where they entrap themselves through their saliva, and it becomes like a prison, right? And then eventually they have to break free from that prison that they created by themselves, and then now they can, instead of being like a worm, now they become a butterfly, and it's by meditation. They actually meditate to get free of the cocoon or this, uh, you know, uh, uh, saliva type of prison that they built for themselves, and they try and break free of it and become a butterfly. So there's different states of existence of a butterfly, and uh, the butterfly becomes entrapped by its own, I think, saliva, and that saliva sort of hardens and they become trapped. And then eventually they have to break through that trap and uh, and free themselves. And now they're flying around as a butterfly. Yes.
So So it's saying it's giving me the cycle of the butterfly. So
Yes.
the butterfly, before the butterfly comes to chrysalis, once the caterpillar reaches a certain size, it stops eating and forms the chrysalis or pupa. Inside its protective casing, a remarkable transformation.
Protective casing, right? They are put in this protective casing, meaning they can't fly. Go ahead.
Transformation takes place. The caterpillar's body breaks down into a kind of cellular
Cellular.
cellular
Cellular.
cells are reorganized into a butterfly. This process involves the development of wings, antenna, and other adult features. Butterfly adult. After a period of time, the fully developed butterfly emerges from the chrysalis.
That's like a covering that they look like a worm. You know, that's not that's not has free wings and things like that.
Larva.
Okay, larva.
He developed a butterfly emerges from the chrysalis. It waits for its wings to dry and harden before it can fly. Once ready, the butterfly takes flight and begins the adult phase of its life, focusing on reproduction and continuing the life cycle. The transformation is guided by hormones and intricate biological process, turning a crawling caterpillar into a flying butterfly.
Yeah, the butterfly actually meditates on developing, wings and flying through the air, uh, and eventually it happens that they go from being like a worm to a butterfly, you know, and it's like a miracle how it happens. So even the butterfly went through a phase of their development as like a worm, and then and even before being a worm, they were like caught in a cocoon. They were entrapped by their own, let's say, saliva, and then they meditating on getting out of that entrapment, and eventually they become a butterfly. So it's interesting when you study the life cycle of a butterfly. So it goes through different cycles, and eventually it liberates itself, and now it's flying around. Yeah.
If you can see the pupa, like you can see through it, and you can see the butterfly inside the chrysalis.
Yes.
It's like with the duct around it.
Yeah.
It's hanging from a branch, and it's like transparent egg kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's hanging from a branch with like a thread and connected to the branch. And then the butterfly is growing inside. And then the next picture it shows that the butterfly's face is hanging upside down actually.
Okay.
So it pushes with I think its arms, it pushes the wings. Here. It pushes with arms to break through like the saliva shell.
Yeah.
And then the butterfly hangs down, and then slowly it comes out, and it's hanging onto the shell because it's waiting for the wings to dry, right?
Yeah.
And then later just flies.
It goes through a lot of transformation. from being like a bug to being a butterfly. Yeah. Let's see.
So it also shows how the caterpillar turns into.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. So, in the same way here, it's saying the false ego of identifying one's body as oneself and of claiming things possessed in relationship with this body is called Maya. In Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, the Lord says, I am sitting in everyone's heart, and from me come everyone's remembrance and forgetfulness. Devahuti has stated that false identification of the body with the self and attachment for possessions in relation to the body are also under the direction of the Lord. Does this mean that the Lord discriminates by engaging one in his devotional service and another in sense gratification? If that were true, it would be an incongruity on the part of the Supreme Lord. Okay, incongruity means something that is not, let's say, consistent. Yeah. Uh, he would be, there would be prejudice, let's put it like that. If that were true, but see, Krishna is equal to everyone. And incongruity would mean, well, he helps some people and he doesn't help other people. So if that were true, does this mean that the Lord discriminates by engaging one in his devotional service and another in sense gratification? If that were true, it would be an incongruity on the part of the Supreme Lord. But that is not the actual fact. As soon as the living entity forgets his real constitutional position of eternal servitorship to the Lord and wants instead to enjoy himself by sense gratification, he is captured by Maya. This capture by Maya is the consciousness of false identification with the body and attachment for the possessions of the body. These are the activities of Maya. And since Maya is also an agent of the Lord, it is indirectly the action of the Lord. The Lord is merciful if anyone wants to forget him and enjoy this material world. He gives them full facility, not directly, but through the agency of his material potency. Therefore, since the material potency is the Lord's energy, indirectly it is the Lord who gives the facility to forget him. Devahuti therefore said, my engagement in sense gratification was also due to you with a capital Y. Now kindly get me free from this entanglement. So, therefore, we are never independent of Krishna. Whether we want to forget God, Krishna has to help us, or if we want to remember God, Krishna has to help us. Either way, we are always dependent on Krishna. No one is independent. And you'll see that traditionally in the world, people want to be independent in different ways. For example, there's this one phrase, no master, no God. Look that up. No master, no God. This is a phrase that was used often by people that are completely in illusion. And it's their philosophy. No master, no God. We are completely independent. And this is developed by associating with non-devotees, this concept of no master, no God. I am independent. This I am independent is the last snare of Maya.
It is a declaration of independence from both the power traditional power structures and religious doctrines, embracing self-determinism and individualism.
Right. In other words, complete false identification of the self. And that's what this verse says in the purport. The false ego of identifying one's body as oneself and of claiming things possessed in relationship with this body is called Maya. Yeah, so some people who have, Maya on steroids, well, it'd be someone like Hitler. Hitler would, he's a crazy man. He was preaching "I am this body" philosophy, to the Germans, and they, millions of people believed what he said, and look what happened. It ended up in a big disaster, you know. And that's not all. I mean, the Russians also say, "I am this body." The Americans say, "I am this body." Everybody's saying, "I am this body." And based on "I am this body," they get into wars, they kill each other. And after the war, uh, they become friends also. You have, sometimes you have these uh, veterans, so there are veterans from the side that was defeated, and you have veterans from the side that was victorious. And after the war, sometimes they get together, and they have a like some kind of party or something, celebrating the fact that the war is over. But yet, before that, they were trying to kill each other. So look that up. Veterans of war. Uh, Sometimes the adversaries of war, after it's all over, they get together with the people that they were fighting against, and they have like a uh, a rendezvous where they come together and they reminisce, what was happening in the war. Yes.
Veterans of war refers to individuals who have served in the armed forces during times of conflict. They often experience unique challenges, including physical injuries, physiological effects such as
Physiological.
physiological effects such as PTSD, conditional, no, post-traumatic stress
In other words, if they experience, bombs blowing up around them, and they see their comrades blown apart, uh, they can't get it out of their mind, and it influences their whole life. They can't function normally because of the horrors that they experienced in war. So that post means after the fact. What does it say? Post.
traumatic.
Okay, post-traumatic stress disorder. That means that basically they can't forget all the horrible things they experienced in war. And when there is war, there's so many horrible things that you experience. So it's like a mental sickness that you have the rest of your life. And they have to, get some treatment for it. And sometimes they can never, get out of that state of shock and horror that they experience. Like, for example, you might have a very good friend who joined the army with you and went through a boot camp, and now they're in the battlefield together, and all of a sudden a bullet kills your friend, and you're next to him, and now your friend is dead. The bullet went right through his head. And when you see that, you know, you can never forget it. And you get this post traumatic syndrome. That means that after it happened, let's say 50 years after it happened, you're still affected by it and you can't get it out of your mind. And it influences your life. And sometimes it causes mental types of it's not a mental disease, but a mental state where you can't function anymore because you're overwhelmed by the horror that you experienced during war. Okay? War is very, very bad because you see very, very horrible things. You can be, shooting your gun, and next to you is your best friend, and all of a sudden your best friend gets hit by a bullet, and now they're bleeding to death, and they're crying, "Please don't, help me," like that, and all of a sudden they die. Now, when you see that, it can affect you the rest of your life because you can't get that horror out of your mind. Seeing your best friend killed right on the battlefield, right next to you. So these are the horrors of war, and most people who have experienced war. I mean, some people like wars, but most people who experience war, they really understand how horrible it is, and they don't want to see it happen again. So after World War One, when so many people died, they said never again, right? And 25 years after that, there was World War Two. And World War Two was even worse than World War One, right? And then after that, they said never again. Where, they started the United Nations to stop all wars, but the wars haven't stopped. So therefore, you could say wars are inevitable because of the ignorance of people. And how do wars start? They start by identifying with the body. So someone says, "Well, I am a German." Another person says, "I am a Frenchman." Another person says, "I am an American." And then they get into a war. And even though they have the United Nations, like today, there's the United Nations. The whole idea of the United Nations was to stop wars, to have a place where people could discuss things and not get to the point of killing each other. But it hasn't worked. The wars have never stopped, even though there's the United Nations. They spend millions of dollars every year, having meetings and all kinds of, oh, let's get together, let's talk this through, let's not fight like that. But still, the wars are going on. The Nations was formed to stop wars, but it's never worked. Why is that? Because Prabhupada says every year there's a new flag in the United Nations. So that means there's disunity. There's more disunity than unity. Like, for example, 5,000 years ago, there was one supreme king of the whole world, like Yudhisthira. He's the king of the whole world, right? And there were lesser kings, but they were all surrendered to Yudhisthira. But today, there's not one world unity. It's fragmented in many different countries, and they all have their own like prejudices, and there's continual war going on somewhere in the world, and people killing each other. Okay, so what we're learning today in this purport is the false ego of identifying one's body as oneself. So this is the number one mistake that everybody makes, and it begins even in their childhood. Just like myself, the first day I went to kindergarten, I had a pail and a shovel, and I remember this because it was very, stressful for me. I go to kindergarten for the first time in my life, and I took my shovel and pail with me. It was my favorite toys. And right away, some kid took it away from me. I got really upset. I remember crying and I was really angry. But of course, at that time, I was not able to speak English. I only knew how to speak Armenian. And I was telling the kid that took it away from me, speaking to him in Armenian, he's like, give me back my pail and shovel. So that was very, stressful for me because of my false attachment and coming into contact with other kids. It's like the big fish always eats the small fish. That's a saying. So all of a sudden, I was not king of my in my little kingdom of the house and so forth. Now I went to school, and I was not the king anymore. There were other kings, and it's the big fish eat the small fish.
Maharaj, as we are growing, our shovel is like different things now, and we are attached to bigger things.
Yes, this is my house. This is my
It's
country.
like a more difficult to give up the attachment.
Yeah.
It's getting stronger and stronger.
Well, what do we learn in Krishna consciousness? I am not this body. That's number one thing we learn, right? That's the hardest thing to let go of. You know, everybody believes I am this body. This body is this. Uh, you know, uh, one person is an American, another person is South American, another person is white, another person is black. They're all identifying with the body. And so, because of that, then eventually people go to wars, killing each other, because they identify with the body, not with the soul. Obviously, everybody has an eternal soul, but people are not educated. So they see the differences of bodies. They don't see the oneness that we're all servants of Krishna. We all have an eternal body. And because kids are not, I mean, do they teach this in school that, to kids, you have an eternal body? Do they teach you that in school? No. So the most important thing to learn, they don't teach it. You can go through your whole life believing I am this body. And by the way, uh, the body keeps changing. So which body are you? The one you had when you're 6 years old, or the one you had when you're 60 years old? You see. So even though nature is teaching you that you're not this body, still people identify with the body. So that bodily identification is the number one illusion. Illusion uh, is when you believe something that was never true. And delusion is when you act, uh, you know, on that principle of illusion. When put on a uniform and get a gun, and you're trained to go to war and kill people. But the poor guys that are on the battlefield killing each other, after the war, they have this reconciliation where they come together and they say, yeah, well, I was on this side and you were on the other side, and they're drinking beer or something and talking about, the experiences they had when they were trying to kill each other. They have these, post-war, let's say, uh, experiences where all the people come together that were previously enemies and killing each other. So ultimately, you realize, wait a minute, this whole killing thing was false. Uh, you know, just like let's say you're on the battlefield and you shoot someone and kill them, and then you look at what they have in their pocket or in their helmet or whatever, and you see, pictures of their wife and children, and you suddenly realize, wow, this guy's like me, I also have a wife and children. And now I just killed this man, and the wife and children are never going to see him again. So you have to have a what you would call a thick skin to be able to pull a trigger and kill someone on the battlefield. You have to be trained to do it. Many people can't uh, can't be trained to do that. It requires that's why when you have an army, the majority of people are not warriors. They're supporting the warriors. Just like the United States Army. There's a lot of people, it's like 2 million people, but how many of them are actual warriors that actually, shoot and have airplanes and throwing bombs on people's cities and things like that. There's not a lot of people. The ones you might have, we have like 2 million people in the army in the United States, but only 150,000 of them are actual warriors. They actually, go out there and kill. You know, they're elite. They have a lot of training. You have to be trained a lot to pull a trigger and kill someone. It's not an easy thing to do. So today, a person who's a warrior, they have a lot of training to be able to go out and kill people. Most of the people in the army they're supporting the killers. You know, they're not actually killers themselves. They're supporting the killers, and the killers are highly trained. You have to be highly trained to pull a trigger and kill somebody. Like if someone gave you a gun right now and said, "Okay, go out and start shooting it," would you do that? No. Yeah, it takes a lot of training. It's psychological, let's say, manipulation to be able to do that. And you have to be angry. You have to be taught to be angry to actually pull a trigger and kill someone.
After pulling the trigger and handling those effects is more
Yeah.
difficult.
Well, that's why a lot of soldiers that are killers, they end up becoming alcoholics. You know, trying to forget all the horrors that they experienced while they were killing. And that's they call that post
PTSD.
huh?
The PTSD,
Yeah, PTSD.
post-traumatic
Yeah,
stress.
post-traumatic stress. A lot of people, a lot of young men have that, you know, if they experience the horrors of war. War is horrible. And a lot of people have that post-traumatic stress. And they have to, for years and years, they have to go to psychiatrists and get all kinds of treatment to get over it. And sometimes they never get over it. You know. Okay, so you see, the actual fighters, the actual warriors, they're not that many. There's only about uh, maybe 150,000 real warriors in the army. And in the army, there's like 2 million people, but only about 150,000 of them are actually warriors that actually are trained to kill. The others just uh, support them. You have cooks in the army, and you have nurses and doctors in the army, and you have
So
supply people.
US has about 473,000 active duty soldiers.
Right. Out of how many people in the army? I think there's like 2 million people in the United States Army. you look at the Pandavas, they were highly trained. They were warriors. They were very highly trained. And basically they were trained with their adversaries. They grew up together. They what's his name? Yeah, and so forth. They grew up together, and then they went to war against each other. They had the same guru.
Yeah, it's about 2.1 million.
Right. But only 400,000 are actually active duty.
Active duty soldiers, and there is the Army National Guard, then the Army Reserve, then the rest of them are all support.
Yeah. Because it takes a lot of training to be able to pull that trigger and kill people. Most people can't do it.
It is after the war, what veterans are doing. Like when veterans of war come together after conflict.
Yeah.
It's often for various profound reasons tied to shared experiences, emotional healing, solidarity, and solidarity, and a search for purpose after the intensity of it.
Yeah, you realize the whole thing was nonsense.
They're searching for a purpose.
Yeah.
Like when?
Yeah. Yeah, because they all have mothers and fathers, they all have wives and children, and they were killing each other. Now the war is over, they come together, but it's a very surrealistic thing. After trying to kill each other, now they come together and they're friends. But it's a very strange, feeling that you're trying to make friends with someone that you tried to kill before. Very, very strange experiences. Okay, so our takeaway today. By the grace of the Lord, one is allowed to enjoy this material world. But when one is disgusted with material enjoyment and is frustrated, and when one sincerely surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Lord, then the Lord is so kind that he frees one from the entanglements. Entanglements, what, all false ideas, false relationships, and so forth. Right? Krishna says, therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, first of all, surrender, and then I will take charge of you and free you from all reactions of sinful activities. Sinful activities are those activities performed in forgetfulness of our relationship with the Lord. In this material world, activities for material enjoyment, which are considered to be pious, are also sinful. For example, one sometimes gives something in charity to a needy person with a view to getting back the money 4 times increased. Giving with the purpose of gaining something is called charity in the mode of passion. Everything done here is done in the modes of material nature, and therefore all activities but service to the Lord are sinful. That's a big statement. Because of sinful activities, we become attracted by the illusion of material attachment, and we think, I am this body. I think of the body as myself, and of the bodily possessions as mine. Devahuti requested Lord Kapila to free her from that entanglement of false identification and false possession. So these are big statements, and this is the real, let's say, challenge of people in life to free themselves, just like Devahuti is praying to her son, Kapila Muni, to free her from this entanglement of false identification and false possession. The whole world, even today, is acting under the illusion of false identification and false possession. So, there are many parts of the world that are, there's war going on. sometimes the war lasts like 100 years or more. There's a certain part of land that one country or another country, where two countries are at war. They might not be shooting each other, but they're in a state of war. You look that up.
Cold War, I think they call it.
The Cold War.
Kind of not all the way. I mean, even between India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but that's active, like
and India and China also.
Yeah. There's some kind of incursions keep happening. Like they try to push, they try to push. It doesn't become all out war.
Yeah.
But
it's been going on for years.
Yeah.
There was the 100-year war. This was happening in Europe between Britain and France. 100-year war. And finally people got sick and tired of this, 100-year war. But even today you could, the United States is more or less at war with Russia. They have never really, stopped being enemies. Sometimes they meet each other, they talk and everything, but still, they're producing, atomic bombs to kill each other. And that's why Devahuti says, now be pleased, my Lord, to dispel my great delusion. Due to my feeling of false ego, I have been engaged by your Maya and have identified myself with the body and consequent bodily relations. And then the purport, it says, the false ego of identifying one's body as oneself and of claiming things possessed in relationship with the body is called Maya. That's a very good definition. False ego of identifying one's body as oneself and of claiming things possessed in relationship with this body is called Maya.
Time check.
Devahuti has stated that false identification of the body with the self and attachment for possessions in relation to the body are also under the direction of the Lord. Does this mean that the Lord discriminates by engaging one in his devotional service and another in sense gratification? If that were true, it would be an incongruity on the part of the Supreme Lord. In other words, he would be prejudiced, in other words. But actually, Krishna is equal to everyone. He's not.
Just a time check because it's 7:40.
Okay. Okay. So tomorrow we'll continue on the Canto 3, in chapter 25, verse number 10. Go over that again. So far. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Have a very good day chanting Hare Krishna and remembering Krishna all day long.
Great, Krishna. So since we'll continue on this verse, if there are any questions, feel free to post in the group or you can ask Maharaj tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Most people forget Krishna all day. We should remember Krishna all day long. That's Krishna conscious.
Thank you.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.